guys haven't never been honest about the fact that what you're seeing, guys come home shooting and all this stuff, these are guys coming home, they're terrified. They're scared, really, of what the unknown of what's out here.
You just came home, you hear me?
I'm going back to the streets regardless. Like, I don't care if I gotta go back to jail. I'm gonna get my mom and my daughter some money.
The street life is ending, dude. It is ending slowly. It's dying slowly instead of me dying slowly.
If this is all you know from a little kid, this is all you've seen. They're the only men on your life. Them guys on the corner, that's who you trust, that's who you love, that's your family.
But in no way, shape, or form is just like telling everybody's story, you know what I mean?
Once you taste it again, dude, it's gonna be hard to get out.
It's a negative pull of gravity.
It's like just keep sucking you back in.
Because the streets is pulling him, the homies are pulling him.
It feels like, man, it's like this force, this unseen force just literally pulling people back into, you know? And the thing is, how does it relate to them?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to do 2 introductions. The first one being and thanking and welcoming our Secretary of Corrections, Mr. John Wetzel. We really appreciate him being here. It's my buddy. And then the next one is going to be what has turned out to be one of my better friends here, L. Sawyer. I met Al back in about 2 years ago. I was in Philadelphia at a reentry summit at Widener University. And I saw his documentary. He did just a clip of it with U.S. Attorney's Office. And I said to him then, I'm going to make sure that you get all over the state to show this. And we've been traveling all over the state doing this documentary, with him doing screenings of the documentary. And he's been going all over the country with it, actually. Because it is something that needs to be seen. It tells a different story. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Elle.
I like how she said that we travel around the state. That's very generous because she drags me by my earlobes is how I like to. Anyways, so real quick, I mean, I don't really have a kind of speech. I hope everybody enjoyed the movie. Thank you so much, Carl, for having me come out, and thank you all for watching it and your kind words about it, and it's very encouraging. Again, we showed this version of the movie about 80 times over the past year, a little over now, thanks to Charla. Anyways, no, and every time, you never want to kind of understate the responses, because it's definitely a personal project for me. Like I say, now I've been home going on 12 years, and over a 12-year period of time, it was only like past 3 years that I actually even came, what would be out about the fact that I was in prison. Because of the stigma attached to it, and because of all the kind of prejudice and preconceived notions about someone that has been in prison. So I actually, again, coming home, hearing the movie, me talking about doorknobs, but, the more powerful thing for me was literally flushing the toilet was weird, and things like that. So literally me being home was literally me almost mimicking folks I was around, which, a lot of times, I was mimicking a lot of people that didn't necessarily look like me or didn't have my experience. So it's very encouraging when I meet, different groups of people, and I've been very blessed during my travels to actually meet these kind of, gems of just good people in the fight of just what's right, not on one side or the other, just literally what's right. Just like I was talking about Mr. Wetzel, saying, the idea wasn't to kind of yield on one side or the other. The idea is to set a bar and invite everybody to step up to it. So that's very encouraging to me, and it kind of fuels what I do. There's a kind of quote I use for my work, and we're working on returning the movie Pull of Gravity into a reentry-based, video-based reentry program. And we have other projects coming out, and there's a quote that I use to kind of describe my work, and it's a Plato quote. I don't know how early it is for a Plato quote, but it might be too early for that. You can't do a Plato quote before 3 o'clock. That's kind of like the rules, right? Anyways, but the quote is about making strange. And the idea is that you make strange normal, yet keeping strange amongst them. The idea is that, the fact that I will be, I put my life out there and literally, be forthcoming with my experience, which could be strange to some folks, but yet I'm still here. And ideally, me being here and showing the work of other folks to be a model for other people to come and for powers that be to actually consider, again, what's right. So with that said, I'll take any questions at all, or I think we're about to have a panel. So please, question. Yes, sir.
Not a question, it's a comment.
Please.
That's a very powerful video, and I commend you for all that you've done for other people after your own experience.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to add that you are probably the perfect example of how men who are incarcerated can be reformed, come back out into our society, because what you do exudes that positive reinforcement. Those who don't understand and know. You're doing a fantastic job. God's blessing you mightily.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Can you give us just a brief update on Andy, Kev, and even yourself?
Yeah. Thank you for kind of bringing me back to that, right? So real quick is basically the kind of what would be key people in the movie was Andy, Kev, and myself. And Andy and Kev both been back to prison since within this past year, multiple times. Kev is still there. Andy just came home off of a simple possession charge of 2 bags of crack, which he did, 8 months, I think, or so. But both of them have been to screenings and actually sat on panels and stuff, and it was very encouraging for them. Of the movie, as you see the people in the movie, about 15 people ultimately were interviewed in the movie, and of the 15, about 12 of them, 12 or 13 are back in prison or have been back in prison since this past year. And then the people in the movie, even in the background, 3 of the folks in the movie were killed in the past year. 3. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What became of the one gentleman had the confrontation with the police officer?
Yeah, that's TT. That's TT. TT's awesome. TT's still home. It's very interesting. TT's brother just caught a federal charge recently. So it kind of threw him and his family into this whole thing of wow, I don't want to go down that road, right? So TT himself was locked up for a homicide, a double homicide, a couple years before we shot him, and he was in the county jail for 3 years. He went to 2 different trials and was acquitted twice. And he was in the hole a lot of that time. So it's he has a, his demeanor and his, he was, almost fractured, as a result of that experience. So he's really harsh, not say harsh, but I'm saying he's a, yeah, he speaks his mind. That's what I'm saying. He speaks his mind. But he's a very awesome guy. And he's, Robert Reed now is in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. U.S. Attorney's Office is getting him a job with the ceasefire project. I'm sorry, either one.
That same scene right there with the police officers on bikes, TT. That was so powerful to me because it's so indicative of that sort of power struggle that happens between the system and those that, we're just doing a documentary, we're just on the street, why can't you do it somewhere else? So, I was really interested to find out how that played out. What was the result of that? Because you were standing right there.
Yeah, I was right there, yeah.
And I was waiting for you to say something, but I never did hear you.
Yeah, well, I'm on parole, so you ain't gonna see me do too much talking. You lucky you see me standing there, because you don't be on parole 12 years and hang around a whole bunch of situations like that. Let me just tell you.
It was kind of fascinating to see how did that play out.
Yeah.
How was that resolved?
Well, it was like I say, indicative of situations like that. It went very lightly because the cameras are there. If you notice when he pulled up, the cop said, make sure you get my good side, and TT said, this camera will force your good side. That's so true, right? The idea is that, it's very sad. I mean, one of the biggest problems that we have, and when we talk about reentry, our stance on reentry is is defining or kind of unveiling the environments in which people are coming home to. So showing people literally, okay, we hear about people come home, statistics and things, cool, but do you fully understand the elements that exist within these environments, these small pockets, you know? And one of the harshest kind of realities is the existence or the you know, the presence of police or poor community policing. So when you have situations like that where literally they're not doing anything. Literally they were, I mean, I was there, you know they weren't doing that. But I mean, I'm just saying they weren't doing anything. We was just there, and it was obvious it was video team and everything out there. And the cops literally just couldn't pass by, you know? So it just had to say something and be, you know, that kind of like confrontational, which was, you know, to trigger something else. But ultimately it ended up fine. They just kind of, you know, just kind of say, yes, sir, you know, get out of here, you know, whatever, and then just kind of wandered off. But it could have went bad, and usually does go bad.
First, the video itself was a cultural explosion from the language to the attitudes that the individual had. And there are three different types of attitudes: positive, negative, and the neutral. TT spoke about concepts of social justice. He's saying, if I'm standing here and I'm doing this, why does it seem like you're handling a little bit differently than the other individuals? We go through those same things in our professional life, that if you see a group of ethnic standing in a group, people are like, oh no, I think it's going to be trouble. So sometimes, and TT had a feeling about that, like, I don't like this feeling. It's not good for me. It's not motivating for me. He also talked about motivating individuals who go through that, but how long do we have to attempt to motivate before they get on board? I had a situation where I chased down an individual that broke into a rental car that I had, chased down an individual, but I gave that individual value. What I said to him was, I'm very disappointed in you. I would have never done anything like that to you. I said it when it was just he and I. Also said it when the police came, because I needed them to know that I valued this young man's life, even though he didn't value what I had. Right. Now, he only got a dime. And I have to go to the hearing on July 31st, and I'm gonna say the same thing. Because you're right, we do have to let them know that they have value, but they have to be ready to show their value and not look for excuses. But again, your video was a cultural explosion.
Well, thank you. And just to say something about that, I usually apologize for the language before we play it. And it's interesting. My mom watched it. My mom, you see my mom. My mom was awesome. But my mom watched it, and afterwards, it was at the Constitution Center when we first screened it, and we walked outside. I said, "Mom, so what'd you think?" You know. And she says, "I liked it." I said, "Is everything all right? You know, did you something you didn't agree with? You know, whatever." She said, "Yeah, but the language." And I was like, it was just cut, but I forgot that I was actually, so I just assured her that we had a stunt double that we actually brought in just to kind of fill in. So that, FYI, that was not me. I do not use that kind of language. Put that on camera. Yeah, so yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, again, the documentary was out of this world. It was really great. The question I have is that, you know, when I looked at the one scene where the young man was counting all of those $20 bills in, and the question I have, and I presented numerous times, how can you compete with the lure of instant gratification compared to a restoration job? You know, I mean, I really saw that, which was great too. You know, I mean, we had the restoration jobs in Brooklyn. We used to have restoration throughout the summer where we worked our young people cleaning yards, building buildings, painting buildings throughout the summer, which took them off the street and worked that energy off. And again, I mean, I don't want to get off track. I mean, we have restoration programs back. I don't even know if those programs still exist today, but they can find funds to build prisons, but they can't find funds to do things for restoration. But the other question is, how can you compete when we're dealing with these young folks out here with that instant gratification attitude compared to long-term gratification with a job?
Sure, sure. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I don't know about that too much, but I mean, just the fact, like saying, you know, I can give my opinion. I can know what kind of worked for me, what my experience has been. But to have a definite answer, I mean, I would probably be a lot more rich than I am now if I knew that answer. I mean, the idea is that, you know, what we focus on and talking about reentry. One thing good about it, if you will, is that people, you know, it's like someone been burnt by a fire, and then tell them, say, yo, you don't want to touch that, but here's an opportunity to do this, or here's how things have changed where you don't have to do that. So now if you touch it, now you really kind of just want to touch it for recreational purposes now, That's the case, right? When you catch them. But now, and before they go to prison, to be able to kind of give them options, and like you're talking about these restorative kind of projects that you're talking about is awesome. But to answer that, I don't know. I mean, the reason we had that in the movie is because a lot of people don't realize. Like I was just talking to Mr. Russell, the fact that we had it in the movie. I mean, to us, we were looking and say, everybody knows that's short money. Everybody knows that's a trap, and everybody knows, whatever. He talking about getting girls. You got to dress like me. It's all buffoonery, right? You're like, whatever. But for those kids, that's gospel. Like, that is gospel. And the fact that a lot of responsible men, I'm saying men, aren't present, and you only got that. I mean, there's a quote by Elijah Muhammad. He says, if you have a dirty glass of water and you're thirsty, so and the idea is that, it's a dirty glass of water, but these folks are thirsty, so it takes folks like us to actually apply ourselves, not run away, because these folks, because people in certain conditions have been demonized, so we stay away from them so much. But we're leaving them with that dirty glass of water.
Your point is exactly it. If that's all you see, I mean, you talk about kids with no hope, and it sounds kind of fluffy and tangential, but it's real. And I'll share experience with you. We have our prison, SCI Pine Grove, is where all our youthful offenders go. And I got to tell you, it takes me a week to get over visiting that place. Now, I'm not exaggerating. You see these baby faces in here. I mean, baby faces. And maybe that's just indicative of me getting old. All right, so I'll throw that out there. But you see these young faces in there. And I go cell to cell at every seg unit in the system every year. And I talk to these kids, and I hear the same thing or the same theme time after time. So, if you're a juvenile, you're doing 10 to 20, I would say at minimum, because you've been certified as an adult and all that stuff. And I say, so what are you going to do when you get out? Mr. Wetzel, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to get out. I'm going to get my hustle on for a little bit. But that's indicative of hope. These kids, and the other thing I hear, especially from the young lifers, is, listen, I'm going to be dead by age 25. Right. So what does it matter? And I'll just put it in my word. Look, if I was going to be dead in 6 months, no disrespect to my kids, I wouldn't have a savings account. Why would you? So hope, and hope doesn't cost a thing. We spend a lot of time talking about and money and this and that. What does it cost you to mentor or to get engaged in young children's life in your community right now today? Nothing.
I'm the reentry coordinator for Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And what that means is we're trying to make sure that counties across the state have a process and understand what their process is for folks who are in prison and what that means once they come out of prison. So for Dauphin County, for example, we assess like what their process is for people along the way. Like once you get arrested, then where do you go and how do you transition through the system? And then what happens to you on the way out? And what we're finding out with this whole reentry, and the Secretary is probably much better versed at this than I am, and he started it all. What we're trying to do in counties is make sure that community-based and faith-based organizations have a key role in transitioning people back into the community and making sure that they're successful. But what that means is you have to understand what the issues are a person faces when they're arrested. So you have to go through an assessment piece, which Dauphin County is now implementing. So they'll be assessed, looked at for drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, juvenile issues, and hopefully be referred to service providers in the community that they can be successful, get into these programs and projects, and be successful on the way out. And I'm sure the Secretary can talk about what they're doing in the department in terms of reentry as well, because he now has a whole reentry unit that at least one of the prisons.
Well, I can't talk about reentry without talking about no entry.
Right.
And really, that's where it really needs to start. I mean, the best reentry is no entry. Keep people out of the system altogether. And the beauty of that, and when I talk about no entry, I'm talking primarily about kids. Because if you look at and the two elephants in the room with this issue are always race and poverty, right? So if people are talking about this issue and aren't talking about race and poverty, you might as well not listen to them, right? Because those two are always present, right? So let's start by looking at the kids, and you look at outcomes, especially young men of color. And you have a young man of color who drops out of high school, 69% chance they're going to be locked up. 69% chance. So then when you start talking about faith-based communities, and we changed the law in 2012 to specifically allow us to contract with nonprofits and faith-based communities specifically for reentry. But when you talk about engaging those groups, and in our case, spending money in the community with groups, those same groups are who benefit the community. And we can talk about corrections reform, and El will tell you, he's traveling all over the country, the feds are talking about it, every state's talking about it. But understand this, if there's no community reform as part of it, and I think the thing that really sticks with me is you can do programming, you can assess everybody, you can, every step along the way, get people out into an environment where there's a lack of opportunity, into a broken community, and we could talk all day about trauma and all the other things. That's a piece of this. That's a big piece of this. And the good part is when we find a way to engage groups to do that, it strengthens the entire community. And the one theme that you got to leave here with is we have to find a way to build resilient children in our communities. And that's the long-term answer for all of this.
Speaking from a perspective of, I am an ex-offender and spent 4 different periods of incarceration in Muncie over a 15-year period. And it wasn't that I did not have the skills or the experience. There was no opportunities in the community at the time. You have a lot of churches coming into the prisons. Everybody does prison ministry, but my problem was when I came home and started doing prison ministry, there was nothing in the churches or the community when the person was released that we could continue to provide them some type of support service. And this is what led me to take CRAM, which is my program that operate in 5 counties now, and working with the city of Harrisburg, trying to be one of the agencies to be a face for reentry with the city. And I work with the state system, but not talking about the younger generation, because I don't work with the youth, but I work with the older generation. Us that's been through the ringer 4 or 5 times, that most people are saying throw in the lock them up, throw in the key, because they're going to keep doing it. They do it because there's nothing else left for them. That you can't get employers to hire them. So what CRAM has been doing over the past 2 years, and more so this year, working with the city and partnering with TLC Work-Based Training, is we're trying to do workforce development for ex-offenders. You won't hire them, so let us develop our own workforce. And it's a slow process, but it's a working process. I mean, people, if you can give an ex-offender a job, then they can, take care of their families. They could have their transportation, they could feed themselves, they could, have a place to live. But without a job, and they try to even keep from making the fast money, because I love fast money. I'm not going to say I didn't. I loved it, but I just didn't love the repercussions when you get caught, it's not easy going from $1,000 an hour to $1,000 a month. But if you want to change your life and you really have it in your heart to do it, if you make a presentation to the person, here's how you can live off $1,000 a month, then they may be more subjected to do it. If the opportunity's not there, what do you expect them to do? So that's what we're doing in Dauphin County, because this is our home, and 5 other counties we're trying to help develop. And just to give you a simple example, we got a $12,000 grant last year. With that $12,000, 18 African-American men, I think maybe 2 weren't ex-offenders, received their asbestos license, because we got the grant, paid for all the training, and as a result, they all now have their asbestos license. And if I'm correct, Tarek, I think it's 3 that are currently working as a contractor at the farm, removing asbestos. Now, they probably make more down there in a month than they probably will in 6 months on a regular job, but that helps build up their character.
One thing I got to add, though, you want to talk about changing environment. There is opportunity for folks to be successful. What our job is to make it easier, right? So when you look at the Department of Corrections, we're going to release 20,000 people. What we know is 50% of them are going to be arrested within 3 years. We know another 43% are going to be reincarcerated, and the combination of those two numbers is 62%-ish will either be rearrested or reincarcerated within 3 years. All right, so you look at it and you go, oh my God, we're terrible. That tells me that 38% are successful, right? So what's the difference between the 38% are successful and the 62% who aren't, right? And it's hard work. I mean, we have two former offenders who are entrepreneurs up here. So when people go, oh, they don't have opportunities. No, listen, it's not easy enough. We need to do a lot more work. We need to provide a lot more opportunities. But we can do it, and it is possible. But we have to all be invested. We're all invested. I brag about these guys all the time. I mean, these are success stories. But the whole community is invested in our ability to actually correct people while they're incarcerated. And we have to realize that, that it's not about they doing this or they doing that. It's about us. It's about all of us being engaged in it.
Question. Going back to that resiliency and that question that was asked initially, one of the answers I really believe was right there in that film with that young man with all the 20s, because he said, I haven't seen, or something to the effect that he hadn't seen people with college degrees and so on coming in and talking to me, and talking to us. So his reality is the street and that fast money in his pocket. And like Al said, even though he talked about dress like me and all that, and getting the women and that whole persona, and that's his reality. Perception is real to the one perceiving it. That's his reality. He hasn't had enough people with entrepreneurs and college degrees coming up to him and having some conversation with them on that corner. That's part of the answer. How can we develop that dialogue to have those conversations? Because I think he showed that they're open to it. Ain't nobody coming, because they're not going to go to find us. We've got to go find them and go to them.
And that's why I think it's important, too, for the faith-based, community-based organizations in the community to actually go inside the halfway back facilities, because the halfway back facilities are in the community. So rather than us sit in our big offices and our agencies in the community and expect ex-offenders to come to us, we need to go to them. And my experience has been in the 5 halfway back facilities in Dauphin County, they want you to come in and provide services on site. And that's what we're pushing to do, go in and let them know that when you do come out, when you in Dauphin County or whatever counties you serve in, there are support services available. But I don't know why we think that they're supposed to run and find us. They're not going to do it.
And on top of that, though, there's a lot of opportunities for folks to get involved with youth. The disproportionate minority contact rate in Dauphin County is ridiculous. We have kids that are in different programs, and I know for PAL, for example, because I'm on their board, we're screaming for volunteers. We can't get people to volunteer to come for 4 hours on a Friday night just to be. I was in a gym with 70 young men one night all by myself while they played basketball, because we couldn't get anybody in the community to come and be a part of the volunteer piece. All these kids wanted to do was play basketball. Thank God they didn't want to fight, because I'd have been in trouble. But those are the kind of opportunities that are available to community members. All you have to do is just come. You don't have to do anything. It'd be nice if you have a conversation and push out some of your knowledge, but just the opportunity to come and intermingle with kids and show them a different way. I think we have those opportunities, but we don't have people to just take up the opportunity.
Go ahead, sir. I just want to make a couple comments. And it sounds like Russell actually saying it's a dialogue, an idea that I've been hearing floating around. And he illustrated it eloquently and beautifully in his piece. It's because it illustrates person and environment. He saw those men exactly where they were, himself included. And I remember his brother saying that they had a different expectation of him when he would be released. Him being the breadwinner, he'd be back on the street, but he decided to do something differently. And it sounds like corrections had signed on board that the person's environment needs to be considered. What are they returning home to? That's part number one. But to speak to what she's saying, faith-based organizations have always been the heart's blood of social service in every community, worldwide. Worldwide, they've always been the first provider of social service, or helping services. Historically, that's historic. And it sounds like we're pointing back in that direction, if that's what I'm hearing. That we have the power and the mechanisms within ourselves, within our communities, to heal our communities. And that sounds like we said, and it sounds to me like division, that corrections is signed on board. And this, please forgive me if I for not mentioning your name. No, Miss Juanita, because I heard you speak at the last question meeting. But that's key. That's key. You have to accept people that's their norm. Their value system is based on what they see on a day-to-day basis. That kid pulling out all of that money. Everybody ascribes to some degree of success and some measure of success in life. But if that's all they see, that becomes their norm. So you have to work from there. You know, how do you get them to see the discrepancy between their value system that they're formed and in their environment, to ascribe to the value system, the norms of the largest society. And I believe in that, therein lies the work.
I think one of the ways that we can do that certainly is by more exposure to those things that are out of their norm.
Yeah.
And that requires those of us who have it on some level to be present where we can engage them.
That's right.
And certainly so, and I think that's what all of the panelists are speaking to, that if we're going to begin to have no entry, so that we don't have to deal with re-entry, then it has to start with us being present. And then Mr. Floyd, and then I have a question from the young lady here in the audience, and another one over here.
I certainly support the issues that you are raising in terms of what they see is their reality. We also have to recognize that our society is structured on a racial basis. That is, our parameters that look at things, it's along racial lines, and we get stereotyped. And some of our kids coming through school, for example, we did analysis of some of the school districts. In Pittsburgh, for example, 45% of the African American boys that were in high school had been suspended or at some point in their life. However, there was another, I think it was 20% or something like that, had been absolutely expelled. And so you have 45% who have had those kinds of troubles. And one of the things that we find is, and it's across racial lines, in which you get stereotyped into what I believe African American kids are like, and African Americans generally are like. White people do this, and sometimes we adopt some of their same practices. And as a result, our kids get kicked out of school. If they're on the street corner someplace, they get harassed by the cops. They get picked up, and ultimately they end up in a situation in which they're in jail. I'll tell you, any kid that's dropped out of school in 9th grade or earlier is going to be in jail in a very short period of time, because we're structured that way. The other thing that we were looking at is the problem of getting a job once you come out. And we published, when I was with the Human Relations Commission, we published some guidance to give employers some guidance as to how you should look at an applicant who has a criminal record. First, you need to look at when did it happen, what was the nature of the offense, how does that offense relate to the job for which you are considering that person for. And if it has no relationship, or if it was 10 years ago when he was 17 years old, those kind of things should not count for certain kinds of jobs. Now, there are other jobs out there that the law requires you to have a clean record in order to get. But we are victims of certain kinds of discrimination that puts us in that position, and all of us should recognize there are ways in which we should fight this and continue to do so in order to reduce the number of kids that are caught up in that kind of system.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I want to speak from a parenting / program standpoint. I'm a parent of 3, obviously black boys. And we have a program for all girls. Now, you asked the question, or you made the statement of raising resilient children. The community could try all day with 20 million programs to raise resilient children, but the key starts in the home. The home is broken. So, for instance, we have children in our program where they come to us every Saturday, we have program, and they are hungry. For that moment, we can feed them. We can feed them internally, we can feed them with our words, we can love them, do all we need to do. But understand, we don't have program on Sunday. On Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they are now hungry. So it's the same process over and over because their homes are broken. So you can have all this community stuff going on, which I'm a firm believer in community programming, but until we figure out a way to correct what's going on in their homes, they will offend. I speak to that to say this. Yes, I have 3 sons, 3 black sons. Did they know when they were born that they would have come out with a chip on their shoulder? No, they didn't know when they came out until they had to experience the world. Did they know everything about racism? No, they didn't know. And in all honesty, not until we moved here, my 19-year-old, every time he drove my car, a cop pulled him over every single time and ran my plate. I've never been pulled over. He got pulled over, and a black cop said to him, "You're so young, I'm surprised you don't have any warrants." And he looked at the cop and he said to the cop, "But why would I?" No. Has he offended? No. But he's been given a foundation where he knows just how far to go because of where he came from at home. But this is the same child who was explained to me as a parent when sometimes I would get so mad with what we deal with in our program. How can these people keep doing this? Why do you keep doing this? Why do you not keep doing this? And he said one day, because this is what they know. This is what they see. So if you go to a song now, there's a song where it's a child singing, and she says, "It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. I want to be what's on TV, and if that's wrong, then don't blame me, because where I'm from, it's what I see." All that money, they're watching TV. They don't know how to get all that money, but they want to be that because in their mind, that money is value. Why is that money valued? Because they haven't been given the value of self. So my first point was, we can have the 5 million programs, but until we have programming that is for mom, that is for child, that teaches how to be a family, that teaches how to be a village, our children will keep going to jail. Our children will keep coming back out to nothingness, going back into the same situation. You've taken something clean and now made it dirty again, and then they're going to go right back in. And that cycle will continue for their children and their children and their children.
I actually think we're saying the same thing. What I was trying to highlight was the fact that nobody from outside the community is going to do that. Nobody from outside the community is going to make that step and take that step. And I'll tell you, we have 51,000, and a big piece of the puzzle is the fact that black men are not in the community. And when you look at the 51,000 people who are locked up, they have at least 81,000 children right now. So I'm with you 100%, absolutely, that it starts in the home. But those same programs you're talking about, the same churches you're talking about, the same mosques you're talking about, I mean, that's where the answer lies. That's a piece of the puzzle. There's no one magic answer. I'm with you 100%. But it absolutely, it has to start from right here in the community.
And I think that's the beauty of the programs and the projects, because if they are the community-based ones, they have to look at and know what is it in their community that needs to be addressed. So you're right. You can't expect that kids are coming from perfect families. You need to go back and look at the life skills programs. You need to make sure the parents are there to receive GED, life skills, how do you wash your clothes, how do you change light bulbs, how do you be a parent. But that's all a part of what is needed in a community, and each community is going to be different. Each community is going to have their own unique set of needs. And that's the importance, I think, of having the community-based programs. Like we looked at PAL, for example, and we're realizing now that we need to be targeting 16 to 24-year-olds. There's a whole lot of programs for kids until they get to that age. But when they get to 16, they're lost, especially our young men. So now we need to focus, look at, okay, what can we do to make sure that they're not the ones that are going into the system? You know, what kind of programs can we provide them? What kind of services can we provide them? But that's something that each community has to do and needs to be doing to save our kids. And we cannot expect anybody else to do that. You know, when I go into the prisons, and I go into a lot of them, unfortunately, and I'm looking down those, it breaks my heart, because all I'm seeing is black and brown faces all day long. And I come out, I got 7 grandkids. I'll do this work because I don't want to make sure none of mine go there, you know. But it's heartbreaking. And I know that the only way it's going to ever change is if the community says, enough is enough. There is a war on our kids, and we have to be the ones to say, we ain't having it, and do something about it. So you're right. But it does come from what is it in our community, what does it look like? What are the needs of our families in our communities? And it comes from life, parenting stuff, and all of the above to make sure that we're hitting, the rubber is meeting the road.
Well, can I say real quick, that it's very interesting you say that, and it's you know, take PCCD for instance, right? They fund programs, and I've traveled enough with Ms. Charlotte to know that they fund a lot of different kind of programs. And it's very interesting that from a layman's side, you would think, say, wow, you know, that program you're funding right there is specifically for men, or that one's specifically for women, or that's like, but from a kind of a different level perception of it, to understand that there's so many different levels of the problem. The more I travel around, and like Charla, the more I go back into prisons, you know, and I was in Greater Fort the other day, and I seen a guy that, you know, I walked with every day, and to see him gray now, or, you know, it just messes me up. And again, I cry, you know, just out of being sad that, you know, that there's nothing that I can do, right, for them, but my charge then turns into how can I educate and inform other folks that don't have to go on that path. The more I travel, the more I see, the more consistencies just pop out at you, right? Because everybody lives in their silos. So to think, okay, if I'm in Philly, or if I'm in Lancaster or Harrisburg, you think it's just, if you're in Lancaster, you think it's the 7th Ward, or if you're in Harrisburg, you think it's the Hill, or you think it's, you know what I mean? If you're, you know, in Pittsburgh, you think it's the Hill. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're, you know, whatever, you think it's your little, and in that city, it may be. In Philly, we're just right at 32 or 36 districts. People are only going to jail and coming back from jail to 6 of those districts. 6. Not 36, 6. So the realities within those little small pockets is a different reality that's in the other pockets, right? So the question then becomes, okay, we've got all these programs, then you got, you know, the Department of Corrections, or all these different people, and a lot of that is literally they're working with a broken system. You know, they're literally trying to make sense out of nonsense, and they're trying their hardest. And some people live and die. You got champions like all across the country, people that champion the cause, and they're fighting literally like shoveling back the sea, they call it, right? And the idea is, like, for me, it just consistently make you think, say, man, without thinking like a bigger like conspiracy theory kind of take on it, but just like looking at it and say, man, something, I mean, it's a system problem. So politicians have to be on board, and they have to not only be on board, but have to have the gall, I'm gonna use the word gall, or have to have the courage to take a hard stand. If any other country, and I'm gonna go there on it, if any other country or any other society in history of man would have been losing the crazy amount of natural resource that we're losing, there would be a moratorium. That's right. There would be a moratorium. I'm losing folks in my neighborhood daily, literally daily. And not just the death, we're talking about literally going to jail. Now, as people say, you know, we can be as callous, say, oh, it is with the jail, that's cool, whatever. I'm 36 years old. I can't imagine being in jail. So many people depend on me being home. So, you know, the idea is that there needs, at some point, I'm just saying to anybody who knows a politician, you know, the idea is to be, not just politicians, but whoever has a sense of power that they can make a difference in their area, to actually use folks that we know that are making a difference as models of people that said, I got the courage to make a change. And I'm not being swayed by money. I'm not being swayed by these things, right? And stepping out of their silos, like I said, we show this movie, and one thing this movie does, I mean, again, it's my movie, so I'm kind of partial about it, but the mission of it was to show people something outside of their silos. Show people, politicians, we show it to judges all the time. We, you know, again, the Department of Justice, to all, you know, whoever, and we show it to them, and literally they're like blown away that people live in those conditions. I'm like, wow, but you're the ones that make the rules and the laws based off of what's against the law and what's not. Judges judge people that come in front of them for an infraction of a law. But look at TT. If TT was on parole, take me, I was on parole. They could literally call the paddy wagon and pick everybody up on that corner. And then I would have sat for 9 months up in upstate. Judge would be like, yeah, I heard it before. Get out of here. I'm like, homie, but you know these environments. All I'm saying is, it's about exposure, like brother said. It's about, like, you know, it's about a lot of things, but it's multiple, you know, pieces to this. It takes courage from people that can make a difference and change, and it takes us stepping up in our own communities.
We have two questions, the young lady and then the young gentleman there.
I just want to piggyback on what he said. The whole point of the politicians having, you know, the courage and everything, I think more of it may be inclusive of maybe more so a passion. Having the same thoughts, you know what I mean? Because they can have the courage to speak about whatever it is they're speaking in reference to, but unless you have that same passion and you actually can relate in some way, shape, or form, then the idea is lost. And to what Tanya was saying, you know, we deal with the girls on a daily, you know, on Saturdays, and you know, if they call us on a weekend or even during the days. I just saw a girl last night and it kind of just broke my heart because, you know, my daughter is 17 at a party and this young girl's 15 at the same party, and I'm looking at the age difference and what's going on at the party, and I'm like, you know, I see this girl, and I see my daughter at 17 completely dressed, and I see this young girl and she left nothing to the imagination. But you know, the point I'm making here is that, you know, the girls are just as essential. You know, we talk about these boys and, you know, recidivism is high. It absolutely is. And these girls are actually coming in at a higher rate into the criminal justice system, you know, that system that we call the system. But they're coming in at a higher rate than what they have done previously. So we definitely need to do something to, an ounce of prevention. And maybe that's what I'm really getting to. What do we have out there for prevention? And I think maybe if we did something more, I know we have so many community-based programs and things of that nature, but if we touted, you know, hey, we have this particular program out here and this encourages all youth instead of being selective in nature, or maybe exclusive of boys or exclusive of girls. I mean, and understand that everybody needs to be reached. You know, she doesn't live in Harrisburg City. I don't live in Harrisburg City, but we come into the city and work with the girls from the city, only because we know that the things that they need, and we're trying to prevent further issues, you know, down the line. You know, my husband's a fireman in Harrisburg, and you know, we have all girls at home, and you know, he's, you know, working at night, and he's like, you know, you should see these girls half naked walking down the street, and you know, he's looking at these young ladies, and he's like, you know, here's a 12-year-old, and she's half dressed, you know, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, no less. So what do we think is going on at 1 o'clock in the morning when we're half dressed and we're walking down the street? Where are you going? Where's your parental guidance? What? Right. Where are your parents? Where's somebody there to help you? This is what supports that negative behavior and supports that, oh, let's go into the prison system, because now, you know, we were talking about it the other day, you know, a lot of girls in the city, you know, they get pregnant after high school, or even if they don't finish high school, the first thing they talk about is being a nurse's assistant. What is that? What is that? I don't understand it. I've never even seen anything like it. This is, it's a disgusting, it's cyclical, it's really gross.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. So clearly, these are not new issues. This has been going on for some time, and it's unfortunate. And I think Mr. Wetzel, you know, Secretary Wetzel, you know better than I how many folks are incarcerated nationally. It's just an astounding number, to be sure. And it continues to grow. We keep building jails, we keep building institutions, right? So a lot of the ideas that have been discussed are not necessarily new ideas. These are ideas that have been employed for decades almost. And they're not necessarily improving the numbers. The ex-offender reentry program ideas are not necessarily new conceptually. The idea of family, which is what I was going to bring up, because I think that's pretty essential to this dialogue, is not new, although it's essential to the dialogue. When I grew up, I could name right now every coach that I had. I can name them all right now. I can see them clearly. There was an expectation growing up in our family about what we were going to be and what we were supposed to do. And yeah, when the lights came on, you get in the house. You're not out at 1 o'clock in the morning. And the expectations were clear, not just from my father, who was in my life, who still is, but also from those coaches. And I'm not sure if we've created that community expectation for our kids and for those that get released. So it's not just the no entry, but also the re-entry part. The expectations being established. My children, I have girls as well, they're all under 11. If you ask them, are you going to college? They would not hesitate. They're going to college. If you ask them, where are you going to go to college? They're going to tell you where they're going to college. Not because we hit them every day with it, but what we do is we have on our walls our diplomas, our degrees. We talk about their grandparents and what they've done and how they've done it. We build an expectation without having to hit them over the head with it, but that's just part of the culture. That's just part of what we do. And so I think that's really, and it is the family. It's really what we have to start doing, is building that expectation. How do we do it? I don't know. How we build it on the front end and how we build it on the back end, I'm not sure. Maybe it is through faith-based groups. Maybe it is through politicians. Maybe it is through folks that operate agencies like Secretary Wetzel or myself. But it has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be, quite frankly, a funded effort. We keep defunding everything. We keep taking money away from programs. But I just want to offer that because I think that the complexity of the issues have been discussed a lot over the years. We're still not gaining any ground. But I think it starts with expectations.
The one thing I gotta address is that it is the time's different. It's significantly different. There's never been a time in our country before where there's been more of a concerted effort from the right and the left focused at reducing the use of incarceration. Never. And frankly, my personal belief is that it's because we're broke. But I don't care why. The fact is it's different. And even 5 years ago, you hear the numbers aren't growing. As a matter of fact, we have less people today than we did 3.5 years ago when our administration took over. We stopped construction in one prison and closed 2 others, and that's going on around the country. But what I'm going to tell you is if we don't do this right, and I think really the focus is, and I think that the one significant difference is that you see a concerted effort from government entities to engage non-government entities and to engage faith-based communities to realize that what we've been doing forever has led to this bad system. Whoops. This bad system that we have. And so I think there's a recognition that, look, what we've been doing historically isn't working. And that's why I think I think we have a couple year window to do this right. And I hope that we do.
Chief?
I want to take you back to the movie. It's not a question. The scene, the confrontation between you guys, UL, and the police officers. I don't view that there as anything bad, confrontation, so to speak. What should have happened, you see, police have been trained wrong for years. I can say that there. The way that we look at you coming back into society is wrong, okay? I want to make you my friend, ally, because I know that me walking through the neighborhood with another police officer isn't going to change anything. The kids aren't going to look at that and say, wow, there's police officers. But if I walk through the neighborhood with you, you've been through the system, I want to be allies with you because I want you to prevent other kids from walking where you have come from. So what should have happened is that the line should have crossed. Somebody should have got up and walked across the street and said, "Officer, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so. We're making this here movie."
As soon as you reach your hand out, there have been gunfire, shots. L would have took off running. Yeah, I can give you the whole rundown, anything going on. I'm playing.
Not at all. Not at all. You see, because the police officers want to engage you, they want you to talk to them. Because for the most part, they're scared.
Most certainly.
But they want to get to know you though. So that's why that line is, cross that line, step over the line and say, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so. Yes, I've been to jail. I paid my dues. I want to help you, help me. Here's my hand. Let's talk about it."
Just real quick, I'll say real quick. Thank you for that, because that's, in an ideal world, that's ideally what would happen. After this movie came out, we had the chief of police, we had everybody who's in law enforcement came to the first screening. 4 weeks after the first screening, my house got raided. It's in the full version of the movie, right? We had a 20-minute version that's a little bit longer than this, which is the full final version. My house got raided by the cops. We documented the whole thing, right? Called the film crew while they was raiding my house because it was absurd that they would literally search you and literally kept me in the house for 7 hours in my own house. And we videoed, we mic'd the situation when I'm literally pleading with the cops, like, "Why you treat me like this? Like, what's going on?" If you know, all right, let me give you an example. I'm a director of an organization called the Village of Arts and Humanities. It's a 30-year-old organization. It's in the 22nd district. Literally encapsulates this 12-block radius, right? And when you come there, it's an oasis. A lot of folks have said, that's my trap. A drug dealer has their block. That's my block. I run that area. I'm responsible for so many people in that area. We reach out to the 22nd District Police. There's cops that's their region that's the area where they police. Right. That's been there. The cop that was in my house was there for 7 years in that area. It's not that big of an area. It's the smallest district in Philly. Cop was there for 7 years. He says, "I've never even heard of this place." Right? Didn't know me. We've reached out to that captain 30,000 times. They've changed captains 4 times. Those cops, again, those cops are told that they're going into a war zone. So when again, their crime is committed by less than 1% of the population. In that district, there's 33,000 people. Less than 400 people are causing crime, but 33,000 people got to live in a quote-unquote war zone, that the cops approach it as it's a war zone, and they treat me as an upstanding citizen that's applying myself to that area. They treat me as if I done murdered somebody and I ain't do anything. Again, that's just me, but they treat everybody the same way. Wondering why snitching, nobody testifies against nobody, because the trust is broken. Because these cops are told to go into that. So in an ideal situation, you're absolutely right. And I'm sure this district may be a lot different. In that specific area, in that region, you're right. The cops are terrified. That's why the thing, brother Wetzel was talking about. Secretary was talking about.
They all work.
Was talking about trauma, right? Because we're working with Sandra Bloom and Trauma Informed Care right now. Again, being part of our program, which is a national conversation that not only is the people that go to prison traumatized by the experience. Okay, cool. But the people in the neighborhood, obviously, but the cops themselves suffer what they call vicarious trauma. They're told, you're not in Kansas no more, tighten up, you better not trust anybody. Anybody walk up to you, like they're literally in Kuwait.
I just see, that the training's wrong. I see that the police are training is wrong, So, it's not an overnight answer. But I do think, that if you have to learn how to trust to what happened to you, it probably came from the top. But all police officers do not think like that.
Most certainly.
We're not all like that. It's going to take time for the culture to actually change. But I think you should just give it a chance, and you are, and I admire you for what you're doing. And your house got raided. That's because you were doing something positive, and you scared someone.
Thank you.
That's why.
3 questions. I see 4 now. I see we'll do the 4, and then we're going to wrap up, because this is not to be a one-time opportunity. This is the beginning of the dialogue that we are now having. And so I know you have a lot of questions and some comments, and so we'll get to those 4, and then we'll take an opportunity to wrap up and thank this great panel and thank Elle. But we certainly want to not close it out. We have 4. I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, gotcha. Go.
I just wanted to say real quickly, Senor's point to me was well stated. We are a product of our expectations, and I think he captured that in what he said. You know, we take a look at the kids who we didn't raise, who are in our communities, and we don't give them that positive expectation. We say, oh, he's from the wrong side of the track, he's a bad kid, he's going to wind up in jail. And we can put that expectation in them. We can put that expectation in them by speaking positively to them. I have a son at Temple in North Philly. And my son at Temple in North Philly, he works in one of the toughest schools there right now, doing their after-school program and doing their summer program. And I have a great deal of belief that a lot of us middle-class African Americans who have attained, when we speak to our children about those other kids, we don't tell them, you owe a duty to that other kid. You know, you're one of the talented 10, and you need to give back. So your obligation is to go to those communities, those places where your people are, and you're to speak positive truth to them about who they can be and what they can do. And one of the greatest experiences he had in North Philadelphia, in that neighborhood that he lives in, is that he was arrested. And he was charged with resisting arrest for defending his roommate, who was a Caucasian, when the police were confronting him about an issue. His sense of justice made him speak out to that issue, and he forgot who he was and what he looked like in that neighborhood and in that community. And he wound up being arrested and charged, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to him and to my family, because it doesn't matter where you're from and what you've attained. If you don't understand that you have an obligation to give back and to put yourself, so often we run away from those situations because that person is so foreign to him. The kids that he works with, they come in and they'll cuss him out in a minute, and they're 8, 9 years old. You know, if my son ever cussed at me like that, he'd been knocked out. But that's what they see. That's what they experience. Their dreams and their aspirations are not to be doctors and lawyers. You know, they're to be the guy on the block or be a rapper. So he has to go into that environment and he has to tell them, hey, I'm in college. This is what I do. My dad's a lawyer. You know, my uncle's a doctor. You know, these are the things that you can be. You look just like me. I look just like you. And you know what? He gets respect in that community. The dope dealer who runs the projects that he walks through every day, he gets the head nod. He doesn't get the treatment. They don't mess with him. They know he watches their bad kids. So when he walks through those projects, he gets respect. He's not from there. He didn't grow up there. But he's invested himself in that community. And that's what we need to do. And we need to tell our children, you know, we need to, you know, look, I ain't going to the projects in North Philly with my suit and tie on, because I might not make it out in some respects. But I know I can do it if I had to, because I'm invested in it. And I've taught my son, who's now contemporary with a lot of those people, that he can go there, he can be himself, he can direct them in a positive direction and not be afraid. And so often we get afraid of our own people. Their families are not going to improve overnight. The projects aren't going to improve overnight. But you can speak the truth in love in those communities and help them raise themselves up.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
You know, I can't even, this boy's a very good attorney. He's very eloquent. So there's no use in me trying to follow, but I'm going to say this. Number one thing, you'll never spend a Friday night alone at PAL with 70 kids. So I'm going to give him a call when we're done. But two, I'll say this, race and poverty, the issues you brought up, they are key. They are everything. And without sounding like a racist, segregation wasn't totally a bad thing. We did a lot of things in our own community. We had businesses. We gave each other jobs. We had various levels of social economic levels there. And we looked out for one another. Mr. So-and-so, if my parents weren't home, if Mr. So-and-so down the street saw me doing something, they would know, my parents know before I would get home. So, I mean, all of those things that we used to do a generation ago, maybe, we need to get back to. We need to community policing don't really involve the police. It doesn't involve the police. Community policing is policing our own community. That's making sure that if I see Knucklehead Joe down the street acting like a fool, I'm gonna pull Knucklehead Joe to the side and let say, look, no, you're getting ready to end up over here. So let's go do this, let's go bowling or something, let's take karate or something. We have to police our own community. And it doesn't involve a program. Those programs are great, but they're supplemental. They're supplemental to where there are gaps that we can't fill. We used to do a lot of things in our own community for each other. There used to be the clubs, there used to be the groups, there used to be the house parties. There used to be a lot of things that we did in our own community. But the minute we tried to step out and think that integration is great, we took on values that were not necessarily ours. The American dream became materialism. And when you got materialism mixed with poverty, that's a crazy combination. They don't meet. They don't meet. You got poor people, guys riding down the street with a beat up van with some falling off rims, talking about all the money and the bitches he got. Like, you don't have anything. You need to start working towards that. It's not going to come overnight like that. It's not.
Yes, ma'am. And then the last question up front, and then we'll be wrapping up.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a comment and a question. The comment I want to make is, it was very profound to see the number of children in the film that were involved in the criminal activity and getting called into the system. And we all know, if we're parents or friends of people who have children, that teenagers are defiant anyway, and that there's a certain level of hard-headedness with them that comes with every teenager, not just those in the hood or in neighborhoods that are poverty-stricken. And so I say that to piggyback on all that everyone has said, that there is a certain level of expectation that should be instilled in their children early on, so that when they get to the point of being a teenager, that somehow they're not practicing that along the lines that they eventually will practice that. I want to ask you, Mr. L., at one point, you stated throughout the film, it was a ongoing thing, is that you had a level of expectation with you to provide for your family and to provide for your offspring. And I want to know, at what point was it a turning point for you to do that, being from a young person to a 36-year-old, to the point that you are? What was your turning point to make you change and turn the other side to become an active part of your community?
Well, I always, and I'm gonna keep it short, I always credit a lot of my kind of, let me just say that besides my father passed away when I was like 10-ish, as you see in the movie. Besides that, the first time that I really interacted with like what would be responsible male figures was in prison. Was the lifers at Greater Ford, right? Those folks, like, literally, like, you know, I've always been in awe of, like, you know, the aura, right, of that kind of leadership, pure leadership, you know, and examples of what responsible men are. Purely out of, like, how compassionate, pious, or whatever you want to call it. The idea is, like, how selfless these individuals were. From there, you know, once I had a good example of what that was kind of butted against, you know, compared against folks that were selfish, you know. So I'm like, if I want to be like that or like that, like, you know, again, when I went to prison, I didn't even have a hair on my face. I was 17. Just did almost 2 years in juvenile. Only been home 4 months before I got sentenced to 8 years. So I didn't even, you know, had no clue. So I went from being the man of the house to being put in my place. And again, we was talking about there's no men in the communities. The men are in prison for the most part. I mean, you know, you have you gentlemen, but I mean the rate of people going to prison. So I wasn't around responsible men in the household. So to go to prison, I was around these men. Literally in prison, you're not the man of the house. You know, there's roosters already there. You know, so and I feel as it should. I mean, I'm like that in my neighborhood now. You know, I'm the rooster in that area. And the idea is that there has to be levels, like old heads, young bucks. There has to be. You know, it puts you in place. So a kid can be a kid. can explore, can actually be, you know, have that security around that, you know, they're going to be kind of led in the right direction. And like it was in prison where I could actually relax a little bit on trying to kind of run the show and actually provide, you know, kind of invest in myself. So it was that, and then when I, you know, again, coming home to be able to apply that, and literally even to the day, there's an old head named Haroon in prison. That's like a father to me. I mean, straight up. Like to the point where I'll make a decision now, and I've been home almost 12 years, I'll make a decision now, and I'm like, what would he say about that? Or what would he do? Or what, you know what I mean? Like, you know, so, and I have a family, you know, that I mean, not, you know, an extended family, that I'm literally enacting the same kind of compassion that I witnessed. So if you say a turning point was going to prison and seeing examples of what leadership and what, you know, responsible men was.
Last question, and then let the panel wrap up. Yes, sir.
Hi, I didn't have a question. I was actually just going to sit here and just listen to all the comments, but you know, because for people who don't know, you know, I'm on a DMC board. I actually work with Otis Nash and Reentry for veterans. You know, so I sit on quite a few boards, and I'm more of a doer. I'm just not really a talker. So if I had to have a question, I want to say, so where do we go from here? So what do we do now? Because I think we all know, you know, we all know the score. People go to jail, you get out, and I would like to say it would be nice if we could fix it so that no one's kids go to jail. But you know what? In my life, and not in this lifetime, that's not going to happen, because we would have to be able to go into everybody's home and fix everybody's home. So we can't do that. So what are we, this group right here? So what are we going to do? And before I leave, I just want to say, don't discount the power of your vote. We should have our elected officials sitting right here, the person that you vote for. And a lot of people think it's important. It is important to vote for the president. I'm not going to say it isn't. But you know what? Your local officials. I don't know anybody else. I know Patty Kim, Rob Teplitz, the mayor. He's not the mayor, but the mayor. You know, and it's not just the mayor. You know, his support staff. But you know, I believe in the power of the vote. Okay, and if we're voting for people that are not, you know, that are not doing the things that we need them to do, guess what? Then we need to start voting for people that will. It's just that simple. And I'm going to leave it there. My two things I want to say: believe in the power of our vote, and we need to start engaging our elected officials. And what are we going to do now?
I'll do the what are we going to do now, the what are we going to do next piece, if you don't mind. This is only, as I said from the onset, this is merely the beginning. This is merely to wet the whistle. So more directly, what are we doing now? The mayor's office is committed, has been committed, part of our platform, and me as senior advisor, who's been able to reach out and formulate relationships with people that are in key positions, not only to resources in terms of monetary resources, but resources in terms of human capital, like these nonprofit organizations or Mr. Homer Floyd, who understands the 41 years of the Human Relations Commission, bringing those resources together from a national level, as well as drilling it down from the county and the Criminal Justice Advisory Board, PCCD, and CRESS and others. CRAM, Christian Recovery Aftercare Ministries, and Ms. Juanita Grant partnered with the senior staff out of the mayor's office to do targeted initiatives like understanding in our communities the halfway houses, what they should and or should not be doing. These rooming houses that are popping up in our communities, these, for lack of better terms, these unsupervised yet fully funded situations that are bringing more, oftentimes more harm than help to our communities, are being addressed from the highest office, at least in the city. I can speak specifically for the city. And so Carl Singleton from Hall Manor is the same Carl Singleton that's now sitting in as the mayor's senior advisor, who's saying, here are some of the ills of our community, here's what we're going to do next. So we're engaging those who are receiving the funds to ensure that they are doing what they're funded to do. And if they're not, we're going to call a press conference. We're going to have the secretary and others back who are actually doing the work and call them out. Ask for the money back and channel it in different directions. There's plenty of programs out here. There are plenty of, feel-good stories to be talked about when the camera's rolling. But from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., who was down in William Smith Homes? Who's down in around 6th and Schuylkill? Who's really monitoring? No, there should be programs doing that. There should be outlets that are receiving the people who are facing ill. In other words, just like I'm accustomed to calling people out on behalf of the community, nothing has changed. The same thing now. I got a team. They can't just pick me off, So, and he was behind me too, So I got prayer coming along with me too. So, I'm joking, but I'm serious. So the next steps are that this is put together just to wet the whistle. We're now going to identify who's doing well. We're going to have evaluations in these checkouts. What are the outcomes? What did you sign up for? What did you say you were going to do? And now at this point, if you're doing it, we're going to applaud you. We'll recognize you. And then we'll give you more people to do those positive things for in our community and the surrounding areas. If you're not, it's a conversation of how we get rid of you and replace you. That's the conversation. So the next step, so I say what I mean and mean what I say. And I hope I didn't get all y'all in trouble. I know I didn't get, I'm not in trouble, but the bottom line is we're going to say what we mean and mean what we say. We campaigned on talking about reentry, making sure there's ample opportunities and balanced educational and resource opportunities. And so we're continuing this. The mayor's senior advisor is here on a Saturday, was privileged enough to be able to offer an invitation, and this esteemed panel has come together to not only be on Channel 20, to say we're committed and invested in this community, and hopefully as a capital city, we can lead by example. Not hopefully, we will lead by example, venture out, and we'll ultimately work towards eradicating, we'll ultimately have the goal of eradicating recidivism and entry. I like the way the Secretary said that. So if you all like to give your closings, we can transition.
I have my one closing statement, Mark. I just recently moved into the Weed and Seed neighborhood on South 13th Street. So I'm in the hood, the same hood that I was working with in Weed and Seed. I'm now living in it. I've been in there for a week. The first day, my grandkids were outside sweeping the porch, and I lived beside one of those rooming houses. Backyard was full of trash. I'm telling you, it was like disgusting. So a couple other folks came out, sat on the porch, we talked. So my grandkids were sweeping. I look up, 5 minutes later, they got a broom, they're sweeping. Yesterday, their backyard was mowed. All the trash is now in one area. They called the people to come in and start picking it up. So it's going to take, and I said to myself, you know what, I feel like I'm living in Brooklyn again, because I got all the ethnicities, all the groups right there. I'm hearing all the signs, the sirens, and I don't know why God put me there, but I can see the movement. And that's what it's going to take. I mean, I'm not telling everybody to go back to the hood, but I'm just saying the fact that I'm there and I'm doing things, and I think planting the seed, I think it's going to take one block at a time for us to start making a change. So.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in moving back to the hood, because I definitely did myself. Again, the house I got raided, I was telling you this in the movie. I just moved back there about 3 years ago. Moved there 3 years ago. I'm not originally from there. Originally, I'm from North Carolina. But so I applaud you for making that effort, and I encourage everybody else to. There's a whole theory that people achieve and move out to neighborhoods, which you leave behind people that have to be there. So when I'm leaving on that. I'll keep going, but thank y'all so much again, Mr. Carl. Where's he at? Mayor for the day. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, there are so many of our young men and women in jail that did not commit a violent offense, but for just minor drug issues and so forth. It seems to me that we need to make some changes there and work politically to change the laws and to reduce these sentences and all of those kinds of things. And I remember my mother used to tell me that change is constant, and an idea, any idea stretched by, I'm sorry, I'm messing it up, but a mind stretched by a new idea will never return to its original form. And we need to have some new ideas and push and make those changes.
I'm from the hood, and I still live in the hood, even though I live at 6 in Raleigh. It's still the hood to me. It's a big, beautiful building, but it's still uptown. I'm originally from uptown, and my thing is, I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for ex-offenders. I only work with 18 and up, and I'm starting to work with the 18-year-old to 24-year-old because I'm trying to help people not to make the same mistakes I made, and I'm trying to focus on the first-time offenders because I figure if I can catch them when they're young, they don't become a repeated offender. You know, I'm an ex-offender, I'm an ex-drug addict, you know, saved by the grace of God. And I, you know, 25 years I worked for the state, retired last year. I have nothing to lose, so I can just stand on the mountaintop and be an advocate, you know, for ex-offenders and, you know, try to do as much as I can under CRAM and working with the city. And, you know, we have 14 different support programs. We're one agency. We can't serve 100,000 ex-offenders. But my goal is to keep expanding CRAM so that I can at least cover my home base, which is Dauphin County.
Secretary?
So recently, we applied for a grant. We're one of 13 states that was invited to apply for a recidivism reduction grant. Substantial grant. Three of the 13 states are going to get it, $1 million a year. What we chose to do is we chose to select 2 counties to invest in restructuring the entire reentry system. So the good news is Dauphin County is one of the 2 counties. The bad news is how we selected it was by the counties with the highest recidivism rate, coupled with crime rate, coupled with number of offenders returning, but we also coupled it with school performance and poverty. So if we're fortunate enough to be one of the states, one of the 3 states who get it, we're putting, I mean, the point is we're putting our money where our mouth is. And that grant will look like a re-entry director. We actually got letters of support from all the key county officials in both counties. And we will use those resources to make significant improvements in the community in Harrisburg. And that's what we're committed to do. And if this grant doesn't work, we'll find another one. But we're here and we're not going anywhere.
I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, Mr. Singleton, and everyone. There are a couple of things that I wanted to say just as the moderator in closing, and one of those was Mr. Floyd alluded to the fact that most of our young men and women who are part of the system are part of the system for nonviolent offenses, and they become felons and become part of a system that when we talk about contact with police, a minor contact with police sends you back into the system. So I certainly want to think about the legislative piece that addresses this whole idea of these nonviolent offenses. President Barack Obama is doing a little bit of that, but it certainly needs to trickle down to us in terms of what we do. And as a pastor, I just want to say that one of the things that I talk to people about all the time is sowing seeds. As a teacher in the classroom, I talk to the kids, I'm sowing seeds. And some of the seeds that we sow, we never get to see grow. But the fact of the matter is we ought to be willing to be sowers somewhere, somehow. All right? And so from our standpoint in terms of where we are at Bethany Church and what we're willing to do, and I've told Carl and others that we're not just going to be a silent voice. I'm not here for a camera opportunity. Amen, somebody. I don't need my name in the newspaper, but I do want to make a difference because of what I see in the classroom and what I see from the members of my congregation. And my closing point is, if you haven't read Miss Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, you need to pick it up, you need to read it, you need to understand it, because a lot of what we're dealing with today has to go back to the 1980s when the war on drugs began. That's right. Amen. That now affect our community. And the war on drugs is just another way of disguising the old Jim Crow and making it the new Jim Crow. So check it out. Thank you again for this opportunity. Let's give our panelists a hand and give them